It's a great pleasure to be with you guys. I have been at the work of leadership development now for about 30 years. I've had the opportunity to work with just about every kind of organization you can imagine in just about every kind of industry to create cultures of leadership. So I've been involved in the study of leadership, the practice of leadership. I've written several books about leadership. I've been coaching leaders for 3 decades. And I'm the first to admit, I don't have it all figured out. I'm not here today as the guy with all the answers, but I have noticed a couple of things that I think you're going to find are very congruent with what Rotary stands for. And I have discovered these things, if that's the right word, in the context of my work in the business world. And I've been blessed in my professional life with some incredible mentors. How many of you would describe yourself as being a mentor to somebody else? Can I see your hands? Excellent. One of my mentors is a guy named Terry Pierce, who is arguably one of the finest executive coaches on the planet. And he was writing a while back in the San Francisco Examiner, and he was trying to describe what happens for a lot of his clients when the idea of leadership, when the concept of leadership smacks up against the reality of leadership, and what happens for a lot of these folks when they begin to come to terms with that reality. And I think his words speak pretty well for themselves. Here's the way Terry put it. He said, "There are many people who think they want to be matadors, only to find themselves in the ring with 2,000 pounds of bull bearing down on them, and then discover that what they really wanted was to wear tight pants and hear the crowd roar." The minute you find yourself in the ring facing down 2,000 pounds of literal or figurative bull, that's when you begin to realize that this leadership stuff is not about the accolades, it's not about the status, it's not about the applause, it's a very personal thing, and it involves a very personal stake in the endeavor to change things for the better. So I want to share with you the foundation of what I've found, and let me start with a myth. And you tell me if you think I'm wrong about this. Leadership, fundamentally, as many have come to believe, fundamentally has nothing to do with your position or title. Would you agree with that? And listen, I'll try to be polite about this, but I've met plenty of people over the years in my work that sit very prominently on their company's organizational chart, have thousands and thousands of people that report to them, have very lofty and impressive sounding titles, yet still have, and this is the polite part, a bit of work to do as far as their leadership goes. And I can't tell you how many people I've met that have no positional authority whatsoever. They're nobody's boss, they're nobody's manager, they're nobody's supervisor. They're out there, they're on the front line, they're doing the work, nobody reports to them, and yet they're great leaders by virtue of who they are, what they do, how they approach their work, how they live their lives, and their ability to influence people around them to change the nature of things for the better. This is the kind of person that I've come to call the extreme leader. And this is the person who, in my estimation, and from what I've observed in my years wandering around doing this work, is the kind of person who strives to take a radical leap day in and day out. So LEAP is our roadmap, and it begins with love. Love, energy, audacity, and proof. The extreme leader cultivates love, generates energy, inspires audacity, and provides proof. Love, I'm going to focus on here in just a bit. It's the connection of the heart to the work that we're doing. Energy is the enthusiasm, the engagement, the juice that we bring to bear on the work that we do every day. Audacity, and it's a word that you already heard here once this morning. Audacity is the blank sheet of paper, all possibilities mindset, the intent to change the world regardless of what boundaries we might perceive that might stand in the way. And proof, of course, is the results that we produce, and it's also the consistency between our words and our actions. Now, you'll notice that the word love runs through this whole thing. Would it be safe for me to say that love is not typically a word that you hear in the same sentence as business. Is that fair to say? And in fact, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable when they hear this word in a business conversation. It makes them kind of squirm a little bit in their seats. And I think that's tragic. Not only is love not inappropriate in the context of business, love is at the very foundation of what great leadership is, and it's at the very foundation of any great, thriving, competitive business. What I'm here to tell you, folks, is that love is just damn good business. It is a very powerful, strategic operating principle if we do it right and we do it well. So I share this with you with no hesitation, with no embarrassment. I think love is the right word. It describes the right experience. It's become the foundation of everything that I teach. But I'll also admit to you, I wasn't always quite so bold and confident in using this word with business people. And in fact, one of the first times that I actually used this language in addressing a group, I was speaking at a conference of 1,000 engineers. Why are you laughing? So we all know the stereotype of the engineer, right? It's a stereotype. It's just a stereotype. But, I'm an engineer. I don't do that people thing. That's the stereotype. So I know it's not true for most, but it still made me nervous when I was standing up in front of 1,000 of these people from the internet and telecom industry, and I came out on stage and I started talking about love. So I didn't know if this was gonna work or not. So I was being really hypersensitive and hyper-focused on the body language to see if I was getting through. And I was actually getting through pretty well from what I could tell. Then a couple days later, I got back to my office and I had an email from somebody in that group who was a manager of LAN technicians, network guys. And at least I got through to him because he sent me an email. He wrote to tell me, he said, hey, Farber, that love stuff you were talking about? He said, you're right on, man. He said, I've been telling my guys this since the day I became a manager 10 years ago. And I thought you'd appreciate seeing it in his own words. Here's what he said. I've told my technicians to make the customer absolutely love you, take you home to dinner, love you, meet the wife and kids, love you, because if the customer loves you, you can blow up their building. And they'll say, accidents happen. Probably not the best business approach, by the way. But here's what this tells us about the customer experience. And this, my friends, is the crux of the case for love as a hardcore business principle. As business people, we want our customers to love what we do for them, because anything short of that, we don't get a competitive advantage. If we want our customers to love what we do for them, the product, the service, or the combination of the two that we provide, the only way to really do that in a meaningful and sustainable way over time is to create a culture or an environment in our companies, in our businesses, in our clubs that people love working in. And the only way that I can do that as a leader, positional leader or otherwise, the only way that I can create that kind of culture is to love it, the business, the customer, my colleagues, myself first. So you see, this all gets rather personal rather quickly. And when we can weave all that together, it shows up in the way we do business. It shows up in the impact that we have on people's lives. It shows up in the customer service experience. I'll give you one quick example of this. I live in San Diego, California. I thought you looked familiar. I travel all over, as evidence, by being here with you guys today. So I was out in Boston a while back to speak to the senior management team of a company called, at the time was Sovereign Bank, now it's part of Santander. And I had a little personal business to do, so I was looking, I went to the concierge of the hotel, told him I needed to have some documents notarized, and he said, well, you know what, there's a Sovereign Bank branch right across the street from the hotel, and I'm pretty sure that that they'll take care of you there. So I thought, well, this is very convenient because the next day I was going to be speaking to the senior management team of that bank, and I'd never even been in one. So I thought, this is great because now I can go check out the bank anonymously, do a little ghost customer thing, little reconnaissance work, and get my personal business done at the same time. So I walked across the street. There's a small branch. There's two tellers sitting side by side. I walked up to teller number 1, told her I was looking for a notary. She pointed to teller number 2. She said, that would be Rosella over here. Rosella is also a notary. She'll take care of you. I said, thank you very much. I stepped over to Rosella's window, and we started doing the usual notary stuff, signing and stamping and all that. And she was lovely, but what I need you guys to know is that I didn't say anything to Rosella about what I was doing there. I didn't tell her that the next day in that hotel across the street, I was going to be speaking to all the big bosses of her company. I didn't say anything to Rosella about my philosophy of leadership. It was just sign and stamp and small talk. And after she stamped the last stamp, I asked her a question that I've asked every notary that I've ever used before. What do you think that question was? How much? What do I owe you? And she said, oh no, you don't owe me anything. This is just a service that we provide to our customers. And I said, well, Rosella, you know I'm not a customer. And she said, oh, that's okay. Maybe you will be someday. Yeah, you know. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So then I was struck with this inspiration to ask her this question. I thought, you know what? I can get a glimpse into the culture of this company right now. So I looked around and I said, hey, Rosella, would you mind telling me, how do you like working here at Sovereign Bank? And I'm telling you folks, there was no hesitation. Her face lit up and she said, I love it. I love it. Just like that. And she started telling me about that other bank that she worked for and how terrible that place was. But this place was so different because people took care of each other. And then she started talking about her customers and how her customers sometimes will stop in just to say hello, even when they have no banking to do, because that's the kind of relationship that they have. And I have this odd habit that when I'm talking to somebody who's telling me something that's really relevant to my work, I like to take notes, right? So she's talking, and I'm writing on the back of one of these documents that I just signed. So this is one of the things that she said to me. I'll show you word for word. One of the things she said was, I love my customers, and I get great pleasure from serving them, so I'm happy. And she was explaining this kind of wonderful, virtuous cycle. She loves her customer. I love them so much, and that's why sometimes they stop in just to say hello, and when they do that, it makes me happy, and I take care of them even more, and on it goes. So at one point, it's just beautiful stuff, right? So at one point, I looked up at her, and I said, hey, Rosella, would you mind if I quoted you on this? And she said, would you like me to notarize it? So what do you think I said? Yes, please. That would be great. And she did. What you're looking at here is the back of Rosella's business card. She took out her business card, flipped it over, wrote those words across the top, stamped it, pushed it across the counter to me. I picked it up, ran across the street, took a picture of it with my iPhone, stuck it in my PowerPoint deck, and the next day I showed this to the senior management team. And I said, hey, folks, look what you have going on right across the street here. This is Rosella the Teller. I mean, she's awesome. That's my best Boston accent, sorry. And the boss was so blown away by this that he ran across the street to say thank you to Rosella. And you can imagine the impact that had on her day and the impact, therefore, that had on her customers. And around it goes. So please don't tell me that love has no place in business. Of course it does. It's just damn good business. So let me tie it together for you like this. Doing what you love is important, but it's not the whole story. I suggest that it's about doing what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So the Rotarian value of service above self, service beyond my personal ego, is the same thing that I've found in what makes great leaders everywhere. You're doing what you love, that's your connection. You're using that to serve other people and then serving them in such a way as to have a tremendous impact on their lives so that they love you in return. And I'm going to suggest to you that there's one very specific application of this that I'm going to put this out here as not only something for you to consider, but as a challenge to each and every one of you. Whether you are a Rotarian and have been one for a long time, or whether you are part of Rotaract. How many of you are here? And this idea is based on something that as human beings we all say that we believe in. In the West, this idea is known commonly as the Golden Rule, which basically says do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But as it turns out, that idea reflected in the Golden Rule, which comes out of the Christian faith, and I'm not a theologian, but that's my understanding of it, that sentiment exists in literally every religion, every school of thought, every positive philosophy on the planet. Not only do you find it in Christianity, but you find it in Buddhism and Islam and Hinduism and Judaism, in Native American and Aboriginal practices and beliefs, and it's even at the core of humanistic atheism. And basically what it says is, if I were to net it all out, human beings should do good for other human beings. Now, as a business guy, I look at this and I notice something interesting. Now, the commonality is interesting, but there's also a commonality of something that's missing from this. Here's what's missing from this. You'll notice that not one of these versions from any of these traditions has a qualifier next to it. In other words, there is no asterisk with a footnote at the bottom of the page that says, does not apply Monday through Friday between the hours of 9 to 5, or in any situation where a paycheck is involved. But yet, when we go to work, when you look into most companies, the golden rule is not the rule. It's not even the expectation that we would live up to that or try to live up to it in most businesses, because most businesses we tend to think of as a zero-sum game, that my success is somehow predicated on your not being as successful as I am. And that, my friends, is false. It's just something that we came to believe. Here's what I've found. The greatest leaders that I've met, the extreme leaders, they do get this. And they get this on steroids, metaphorically speaking. In fact, it creates a bit of a paradox. The greatest leaders that I've seen in my work become the greatest leaders not by focusing on their own greatness, not by shining the spotlight on themselves. The greatest leaders become the greatest leaders by making others greater than themselves. And that's the paradox. How do you become one of the greatest leaders? By raising others up above you. So, my Rotarian friends, I would suggest to you and also challenge you to take this to heart and to strive to make others greater than yourself. Now, I understand that this is already part of the Rotarian philosophy and culture. In the U.S., we have a phrase that's called preaching to the choir. You might have something similar in whatever culture you come from. So if I am in fact preaching to the choir on this, my hope is that perhaps I can get you to sing a little bit louder. So, here's what I'm going to suggest. Listen, should we all be striving to make everybody greater than ourselves? And this is, by the way, is not meant to imply that you are just so great already and there's no place else for you to go. This is just a way to think about this, right? I'm putting my own ego aside. I'm investing myself in you with the expressed intent of seeing you become even more successful than I am. That is the true nature of mentorship. So when I asked you in the outset how many of you consider yourself a mentor to somebody else, now I'm going to suggest to you that all of you have this opportunity. I don't care how old or how young you are. I don't care what kind of, it's not fair to say I don't care. Of course I care, but that is not the qualifier for being what I call a GTY, greater than yourself, mentor. So here is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask every single one of you to take on, let's just start with one person. Take on one person. You can take on more if you like, but let's start with one person that you can take on as your GTY project. One person you're going to pour yourself into and be that really significant mentor to see them go on to accomplish more than even you have. So the question is, who is your GTY project going to be? This is not a rhetorical question. I'm going to ask you to answer this question, and many of you already have a GTY project. You just weren't calling that person that. But I'm going to ask every one of you to answer this question by the time you head home on Thursday. Now, here's what I'm going to suggest that you and I do next, because this is a very short period of time and we have a lot to talk about. First of all, I'm going to be hanging around the next 3 days and participating as much as I can. So please don't be shy. Find me, let's talk. Let's build a relationship. And in that spirit, I also invite you to download this guide, the Extreme Leadership Field Guide. If you go to stevefarber.com/field guide, you can download it from there. There's a lot of great ideas as to how to apply these ideas that I've just laid out for you here this morning. And here's what's going to happen, just so you know. This is going to come to you in an automated system, but what you need to know is, if you hit reply to that email where you'll get this guide, it will come directly to me, not to my team. Doesn't get filtered out, comes directly to me. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, emotional outbursts, if there's a story you'd like to share, this is my commitment to you. If you respond and write to me, I will respond to you. It might take me some time, but I will. And I know this is going to sound pathetic, but this is how I make friends nowadays. So I invite you to be my friend and stay connected with me, because the conversation is important. This is a one-way. This is a monologue here this morning. Let's get the conversation going, and I'm there to help in any way that I can. Now, here's what I would like to leave you with. Imagine the possibility here. If every one of us cultivates love by taking on one person as our GTY project, with no condition except to ask that person as a payment back to you to do that for somebody else, to pay it forward, to take on GTY projects of their own. You tell me that we can't literally change the world for the better, one person at a time, and what possible organization is there to better do that than right here at Rotary? Thank you, folks. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.